Hi, my name is Tariq King. I'm a Director of Quality Engineering at Ultimate Software in Western Florida. I'm also an adjunct professor at Florida International University, where I teach software engineering and software testing courses. Originally from Barbados, moved to the US in 2000 to pursue my bachelor's in computer science, and then went on to do my master's and PhD at Florida International University. Starting from, community college in Barbados, I was one of the most outstanding students in economics and got the Chamber of Commerce Award there. Actually, prior to that, I was also most outstanding student for CXE. I did my CXEs in Grand Cayman before moving back to Barbados to go to community college. Once I got over in the US and I got a scholarship to go to Florida Tech, I then was given an assistantship to go and study computer science at the graduate level to do my master's and PhD at Florida International University, which is an assistantship that's funded by the university under Dr. Peter Clark. In terms of Peter Clark, he was really one of my mentors that started from community college. He taught me computer science there, and then I found out that he was actually teaching at Florida International University, and I kind of communicated with him about getting a recommendation letter, and he asked me to come up there and try to pursue a master's or PhD under him. And so he helped me get that initial assistantship, which really covered all of my tuition and gave me a stipend. And then while I was there, I actually received an IBM fellowship, which then was a research award for outstanding students who were doing collaborative research with IBM. And so I did the IBM Research Fellowship and actually did some time at IBM China, their research lab over there. So yeah, while I was in graduate school, I also received several awards for the best research papers and several grants as well, which helped to pay for. So when you publish research as a PhD student, you normally go and present that research in different venues. So part of the outstanding research awards were funding from either the university or from other organizations like IBM that they would pay for your travel to go and present these research papers. So I received several of those as part of that. I also was the top student in terms of graduating from FIU with the highest amount of research papers. I had about 10 research papers when I graduated, which was probably about double the amount of the next person in line. So that seemed very favorably. And then I obviously applied for jobs and actually got 2 offers, one for North Dakota State University to be a professor and the other one from IBM's research lab in Hawthorne. So I also received several teaching awards while I was a graduate student at FIU. One was the Strategic Teaching Initiative Award, which allowed me to teach my first course while I was a PhD student before actually graduating with my PhD. And the other one was what was called the CS0 Teaching Initiative, which was really about high school kids. So I taught a course to high school kids, which was really aimed at getting them interested in the thinking about computer science as a profession. So it's called CS0 as opposed to CS1, CS2, CS3 once you're actually in college, because it was targeting the high school kids. And so I taught them one summer and received a stipend for that. So while I was at NDSU as a professor, I received a nomination to be part of the Who's Who in America, which is a professional listing for both folks in academia and industry who have done outstanding work or research. And so I was in the academic listing for Who's Who as part of my professorship at North Dakota State. So also while I was at North Dakota State, I got the opportunity to collaborate with folks from IBM and Microsoft. There was a Microsoft Fargo campus there, and that really got me into what it is like doing software testing, which was my background, research in industry. And as part of that, we received $1 million grant at North Dakota State to do research and develop educational games, which was really targeting the high school students, interactive ways of them learning biology and so on and so forth by immersing them in 3D worlds and environments. So as part of that $1 million grant, I was working to help build the software engineering tools and infrastructure to actually bring these 3D games to high school students so that they could learn these subjects in a new and innovative way. And so that was really part of my professorship, but it kind of opened my eyes to what it was in the software industry. And so following that path and working with companies like IBM and Microsoft, and now this startup company on these types of games and research in my discipline, started me to think about where I wanted to stretch my effort in terms of professional career. So in 2012, I actually transitioned from academia over to the software industry. I joined a company called called Ultimate Software, which is based in Fort Lauderdale in Weston. And Ultimate was really one of those cases where I found an organization that had a good appreciation for my discipline, which was software testing, as well as education and training and those things. And they had a great culture. So I joined Ultimate as a test architect, and they actually encouraged me to still pursue teaching and collaborative research with Florida International University, which is my alma mater. So for me, it was really perfect. So I joined Ultimate as a test architect and was able to continue doing some of the things that I was doing as a professor, as well as getting exposure to building large-scale applications for customers and clients. It's very different from teaching. It actually put me in a great position to be able to bridge the gap between a lot of what we do in academic research and what happens in industry. I go to 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, Ultimate Software during the week, and then I teach 2 nights a week at FIU from about 7 to about 9 o'clock. And so at Ultimate, I drive their testing practices and quality assurance program. And then at FIU, I teach software engineering. So it kind of helps to keep me balanced between testing, software engineering, academia, and industry. So one of the good things about Ultimate Software is that they invest in their people. And, once I moved into the organization and I saw how many people were actually going overseas to train and to learn more in their profession and their discipline, I wanted to do something a little bit deeper, which was get us to go and share our experiences with the community. And so I was able to bring my academic training over in terms of applying to go and speak on different topics and really get our name out there, and Ultimate supported that fully. It started with some local conferences, and then eventually it was going to conferences in LA. I've been to different places in California in general, San Francisco. We also have one in Vegas and so on and so forth. So that's been very successful in terms of allowing and enabling our employees to actually go and speak as opposed to going to receive and listen, right, and contribute and get our name out there. So I've won a couple of awards at these they're not really competitions, but at these speaker venues in terms of Best Speaker Award at Star West. Did that 2 years in a row. And now people really know the name of Ultimate Software. I recently came back from Star West 2016, and I was one of the lightning keynote speakers there. It was interesting because I'd been going to this conference for 3 years, and the chair, Lee Copeland, who's a very well-known person in the software testing community, after I came off the stage, he asked me, where are you from? I've been going there for 3 years, and he's like, this is the first time that I heard your accent. So I told him I was from Barbados, and because I had a keynote and I did some dramatization, I guess my Bajan accent really came out. So it was good to kind of be able to go on a stage like that in front of 1,500 people. Live audience is a pretty big audience, and then as well as the virtual audiences out there, that's probably another 2,000 or 3,000 people to get exposure for the company, myself, and just be able to get your craft, push it a little further. So at Ultimate, I've also been able to win a number of awards internally, some for technical ingenuity and for creative projects and so on and so forth. They have something called 48 hours where they allow the organization to stop doing business as usual so that folks can just work on anything that they want to work on, right? It's 48 hours that the company kind of gives back to you to kind of be creative. Mostly people obviously build software tools or something that can benefit the project. And I've led teams as well as participated myself. And, nearly every year we've won multiple awards in different categories. So since I first joined, I was promoted to manager and then now to director of quality engineering. So now I actually judge some of these projects as well, which is interesting. So I don't compete anymore. Otherwise, I probably would give myself an award, right? But being able to judge that and look at the talent and evaluate innovative ideas is really like a big plus for me in terms of the job, because once I moved away from an academic setting, I worried about whether or not I'd be able to participate in research and, win research awards and publish papers, but none of that has really stopped. So now in my current role as director of quality engineering, I'm in charge of all of the testing, all of the developer best practices, as well as I lead about 4 teams. One team is in charge of building internal tools, and the other team is their performance engineering and performance testing team. Then there's release management, and then there's a functional or domain user testing group that really represents the end user. And so it's been really interesting to see software on this scale. Like I actually never, once I was here in Barbados, I actually never worked at a software company down here. I had applied for 1 or 2 jobs, and the scale that they have it on up there is really, really something that's quite intimidating. But it's good that you can go, work, advance, do well, and get recognized, and then be able to come back and appreciate and even give back to Barbados. And one of the things that Peter Clark and myself are looking to do is to see if we can start some sort of a fund for students, either from the community college or from UE, to be able to go up and either work at FIU under an assistantship, just as I did, and be able to develop and do big things, right? Because when you look and compare these students that come into FIU, like we had some of the best students, like Peter will tell you, and it's not only because I'm from Barbados and he knew me, but the level that our education is at allows us to be very, very successful. You know, our background in math and science, if that's what you're doing, if you're in the literary aspects of it, you know, being able to speak and write really well. I mean, we come up very well rounded, a lot because of our primary and secondary and then tertiary education at, you know, community college and UE and so on and so forth. So we want to be able to have more opportunities like that, because it is actually getting harder and harder in the US to find good, talented students. And so we think that there's a big pool here. And so we want to at least enable it by providing the money and the funds to be able to do that. I think for me, one of the big things is to be able to make a mark in your discipline, right? So my background has always been computer science and specifically focused on software testing. And as a professor, being able to publish 30-something papers in software testing journals and conferences is one thing. But now in the software industry, being able to infiltrate and really speak at a number of different venues and getting some of the things that we're doing in industry out there is great. But for me, the next level is to really have some patents around software testing tools, software testing techniques and technologies. We've started a separate research division at Ultimate recently that's focusing on the future of software testing. And we've only been running it for about 8 months now. And already we have about 15 things that we think are patentable. And so we just actually submitted those patent ideas to our legal team, and they're going through that. And you know, we're going to file those patents. So that's a major goal, to be able to make an impact from an international standpoint, right? It's one thing to do something either locally or in a bubble at your company. Is another thing to do it nationally, you know, in the United States. And then there's another thing to take it to a level where you're recognized across the world. So that's a huge goal and milestone of mine. Another one, which we kind of talked about, is on the academic side. We have a universities relations team at Ultimate that I recently started to provide funds to the University of North Texas, and hopefully in the next semester to FIU, specifically to Dr. Peter Clark for his software testing research lab. And it would be great to open that up to the University of the West Indies, or have some sort of liaising between Dr. Clark's lab at FIU and the University of the West Indies. I always tell people that I think that the first thing in terms of being able to excel at anything is to always give it 110%, right? Like, you have to want to be the best of the best in what you do and strive for that. I know for me, education was a key part of my success, right? My mother, having been a teacher for 30, 40 years, always instilled in us that you got to go to school, you got to learn, you got to do your work. But I think usually when we talk about that, that is about formal education. But I took that in a different way, in that I think whatever you do, if it's a skill, if it is just an art form, whatever you do, you want to get rid of mediocrity, right? You don't want to just be okay. You should want to be the best of the best and really learn the technical aspects of whatever you're doing and formalize that learning. And because you might have a gift, but if you combine that gift with that formal training, it goes a long way. And so that's one of my guiding principles, is to really excel at what you do. Don't just take your talent for granted, put something behind it, learn the business behind it, learn the technical aspects behind it, and be able to hone that to the next level. Some of the advice that was given to me from a mentor when I was studying computer science, for example, was that, you know, you learn how to program in a language really well. That is your practical skill. And the other thing that he said was learn how to write the English language really well. And at the time, I didn't really understand, like, you know, if I'm going to be a programmer and I want to code, like, why do I need to really learn how to write English really well? And it wasn't until, you know, I decided to pursue a PhD and publish papers and present that I realized that those two things, right? Because I really had that skill behind my discipline and I could do it really well, but then I could also communicate it to several people, to large audiences, to international venues and folks. Like, that was a differentiator between a good programmer who's stuck in a corner at home building something great that no one can hear about, and someone who is able to get that visibility. So I take that kind of approach to everything. Understand that there's more to your skill than you see at first and that you have at your fingertips. The other thing is about how you treat people. You never know where opportunities are going to come from. That's the first thing. It's funny because at our company right now, I remember my first day walking around, the guy that was onboarding me introduced me to a guy named Ken. And Ken was like one of the janitors or the groundsmen and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, cool. It was just Ken. And then he told me the story behind Ken, and that Ken actually used to be the boss's boss at a previous company. I don't know how much Ken's salary is for cleaning up, but I know that Ken probably gets paid a pretty penny. But it was really that our philosophy at Ultimate, and one of the things that I like to go by as well, is that the true measure of a company is how they treat their lowest paid employee. If you think about that, for us, every employee, whether or not you work for facilities or whether or not you're the CEO, they all have the same benefits. It's 100% paid by the organization. And I think that's one of the things that I took away from their culture and put into mind, that whether or not you are intern at the bottom or you're the CEO at the top, you treat everybody with respect, you treat everyone fairly, and you try to make sure that you continue like that. Because our CTO today, he actually used to be an intern at the company. And if you were someone who treated that intern badly, you probably weren't at the company anymore once he became CTO. And so you have to be careful, have to be conscious that, you treat everyone fairly. And the second part to that is taking every opportunity, because you just never know how things are going to spiral. An example that I have of that was while I was at NDSU, I had a student that published a paper, and he came to me and he initially had said that, hey, he wanted to work on cloud computing, and that wasn't my research area. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to help support him. He was a student that also worked at Microsoft, and we had like 2 weeks to prepare something. And, I basically decided to not sleep those 2 weeks and help him get this thing out. And eventually that work turned into a paper award, and then it turned into a book chapter that was published in a prominent book. And that really helped me as a professor who was going on a tenure track to have a book chapter published. And to this date, it's one of only 2 or 3 book chapters that I've ever published. Again, that's about recognizing that everyone has a contribution to make, and not judging things, and just kind of moving forward as if, this person were the most important person, regardless of where you think they are on the scale. The good thing about me and being able to balance the work with the personal life is that it really first depends on your company. The company that I work at now, they have a good culture that kind of enables us to, if you need to do something for your personal life during work hours, you can do that. Not every company is going to be like that, but that will ultimately, and this is what most companies don't understand, that will ultimately give you the returns that you need. Because for me, I spent many weekends working for Ultimate Software that they didn't ask me to work a weekend, but I've known that all the times where I've been, either during the week and I had to do something either for my wife or my daughter or just for myself, run an errand, that I've been able to go and do that without having to worry, then it makes me work ever so much harder, because I feel that they appreciate that. So the first part of that is really the company. If your company enables you to do that, or if you can find a company that enables that, that's important. No, not every company is going to be like that. And so you have to be able to shift priorities regardless. So I have Ultimate Software, but I also teach at FIU, which is a hard thing. When I first started teaching at FIU, I would teach every single semester. That meant that I had the 9 to 5 all the time, and then the 7 to 9 all year round. Once I got married, had a kid, bought a house, it became impossible to kind of do that every single semester, because, you got things to do after work, right? You got your job after. And so what I decided to do is make a compromise there, and started initially once I bought the house and all those life events were going on, just start teaching in the summer and doing that only in the summer and not doing it in the fall and the spring semesters. So that meant that 3 months out of the year, I was really doing that teaching job or that secondary job. And so that was one compromise. And then eventually, as you get things being juggled a little better, maybe you can introduce that some more. But it's tough. You have to make choices and make sure that your family is a priority, but then try to balance your job. My wife, she also works for the same organization. So it's good that we both have those benefits of being flexible. So we don't really feel it as much as we probably could if we didn't work for a company that understood that. There's no magic formula. You got to fight through it. But if you have a company that supports you, it makes it a lot easier. If I had to think of one other professional item on the bucket list, it would really be about actually starting my own company or forming my own company. Actually, me and Peter Clark have been kind of dabbling in different ideas for our discipline in terms of computer science and software engineering. And so we're thinking about that. Around the academic stuff, there's also a lot of training aspects that we could also do, but we've been thinking product-based, not service-based. But it would be great to just be running your own show. So, instead of working your whole life for someone else, right? The key thing for me with Barbados is trying to see if we can keep pace with changing technologies, right? When I moved back here initially from doing my bachelor's degree, and I was doing some work with the national development folks. I was looking to see if I could find opportunities here that would help me to leverage what I had studied overseas. But a lot of the work that I was finding was dated. So, I mean, I think for me, like a vision for Barbados is to be able to really establish us in the technology space. And we don't have to necessarily be leaders, but we also need to keep pace at a sufficient rate. We could be leaders in the Caribbean. That's one thing that we could do and set that goal, because there's tools and technologies that I obviously was hearing about while I was in school down here, but never could actually see. And to go over there and to be able to see them and experience them is a different thing. We can also open that up a little bit more in terms of opportunities for young folks in disciplines that are heavily technology focused to be able to go overseas and kind of spend some time, exchange programs and see that, because it's important to be able to actually put a face to some of the things that you have to learn. I remember taking the A-level computing exam and writing about things that I had never seen, smart cards and stuff like that. And it was just like an imagination for me. I had to dream it, And then the first year in college, I was using these said smart cards to get into buildings and to pay for meals and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, this is what this is, right? And so for Barbados, I think we can open up ourselves a little bit more and find opportunities where we can build relationships and have exchange programs. There's also the opportunity from looking at what we have as a resource, right? Like Barbados is one of the most beautiful islands in the Caribbean. And if you think about what organizations out there might need, maybe they want to send some of their top leaders on sabbaticals for a year. So maybe that's something that we could do to be able to exchange our services or what we have to offer with what they have to offer us.